I come through there, and there's a fella out there nailing a board on that old crooked mesquite tree. So I stopped my car and walked over there, and it's W.E. Stewart. And I asked him what in the world he's doing there, and he said, well, he says, they named this town after me. He said it's W.E. Stewart Land and Irrigation Company. And that's spelled Weslaco, you know, and he just...
Yes, we do, Mr. Robbie. And did you know that Weslaco has been growing for 75 years since that day you so vividly remember? That old-timers like you help keep our traditions alive. So come along with us and see the changes since that day you remember so long ago. But we have to go back in time to the 1500s when the Spanish conquistadores explored the coastline of Texas. They didn't stay too rough for them. Nothing here but a narrow river, brush, cactus, wildcats and javelina, and lots of rattlesnakes. But they declared it for the King of Spain, as was the custom in those days. Geographically speaking, it became Mexico, but was governed by Spain. A couple hundred years later, the King of Spain sent a man by the name of José Escandón to start some towns in this part of his kingdom. Mr. Escandón started a few villages on both sides of the river, but in between the villages, he offered big parcels of land to anyone who would put cattle on them. These ranches were called porciones, Spanish land grants in English. You had to be pretty rich to own one of these ranches, because each one was about a mile wide along the river and 15 miles due north from the river. The ranches all touched each other and were nearly all the same size, except 2 or 3 that were larger than the rest. After another 100 years or so, 1821 to be exact, Mexico fought Spain and won its freedom. Then Texas, which was part of Mexico, did the same thing to Mexico and won its freedom. Well, Mexico and Texas never could agree on its boundary line. There were 2 rivers, one called the Nueces and the other called the Rio Grande. Either one would have been a good boundary because there was nothing in between these 2 rivers. Nothing but brush, cactus, wild animals, and the rattlesnakes. Meanwhile, Texas was taken in as a state of the United States, so now something official had to be decided about that boundary. Well, more fighting, of course, but when the battle was over, the Rio Grande was the winner. The boundary, I mean. And it was all signed and sealed in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So now, all those ranchers along the river suddenly became Americans, and Texans to boot. That really didn't stop the fighting. The Mexican soldiers still made raids across the river, rustling cattle, stealing whatever they could, enough to bring the famous Texas Rangers down. Then the entire United States was at war with itself. It was the Civil War of 1865. Wars are serious, and along with soldiers come men who run the business of wars. And in this case, these men were moving the Confederate cotton to Matamoros to get it away from the Union blockade. And when the gun stopped, these same men took a look around and said, "Say, this here place looks like a good place to stay and make some money." So they did. Next thing you know, Texas named 3 counties down here, Starr, Hidalgo, and Cameron. No big cities yet, just those same villages that Mr. Escandón started back in the 1700s. Camargo, Rio Grande City, Reynosa, and of course Brownsville, which had been a real boom town during the last war. Plenty of ranches, though, in between the villages. These ranches now were pretty nice living right there on the river. The owners were the big patrones with cowboys and all their families living on different parts of the ranch. The patron, he lived in the big house and he built small schools for all the children. And there were always plenty of them around because even his own families lived on the ranch too. The old churches you see along the military highway belonged to the river ranches. The riverboats going from Brownsville to Rio Grande City would stop at each ranch to bring supplies and mail, and most people traveled by these boats because there weren't any roads through all that ranch land. except that one that the soldiers had used. They called it the Military Highway. One of the largest land grants was called Llano Grande. It had been divided into many smaller ranches, because it was a custom back then to divide the ranch equally to each heir. You might recognize a few of the owners' names around here. Bailly, Cavazos, and the Champion south of Weslaco, the Dominguez and the Mora family south of Mercedes, and up there near the Carter Lake was the Cano family ranch. Now everyone knows Manuel Cano. He was once manager of CP&L in Weslaco. Well, when Weslaco was being started, his family lived on the part of the ranch that was once the north side of Llano Grande Lake. Manuel's father went to this school called Guerra School east of Dana. The reason I'm telling you this is that for years people have been saying the first school in Weslaco was the Guerra School. Well, here's proof it wasn't. Guerra School was in Dana back as early as 1912. In 1904, this train, this very one, made the first trip to the valley, first to Harlingen and then to Brownsville. Then the railroad men started laying tracks to the west and building little depots along the way. That's how most of these towns got started. There were depots at Olmito, La Feria, Mercedes, Dana, La Blanca, and one that no longer exists, Llano Grande, between Mercedes and Dana. So you might say things were looking pretty good for our part of Texas. Dana and Mercedes had a few stores the ranchers could go to for supplies, and the trains were faster transportation than the riverboats. Right across the river, Mexico was having lots of trouble, big trouble. When their president, Porfirio Diaz, finished his term in 1911, revolutionaries and counter-revolutionaries tried to take over the country. In all, Mexico had 4 presidents in 9 years. The fighting got really bad in Mexico, even between Reynosa and Matamoros. Young boys were taken from their families and made to fight. This man, Ramon Bautista, was just 14 when he was taken by soldiers. He was lucky and survived, and ended up in Weslaco, believe it or not. His grandson, Silverio, says, things sure are different today. Being so close to Texas, the revolutionary armies would send raiding parties to steal from ranches. It was so bad that our president, John Polk, sent National Guardsmen down here to protect the ranchers. And guess what? One of the garrison of guardsmen was stationed next to that small train depot called Llano Grande. Altogether, 65,000 guardsmen were here, so you know things got pretty bad, but they did put a stop to the raids. The grandmother of Irene Sanchez Rodriguez remembers that Mexican-American families wore an indelible stamp on their hands to identify them from the natives of Mexico, who were viewed with suspicion. Before all these bandits made so much trouble, people on both sides of the river could cross back and forth as they pleased. But now the United States said it would enforce immigration laws. Well, with so much going on in Mexico, it's not hard to believe that a lot of people from over there decided to come over here to our country before the new law took into effect. World War I broke out in Europe, and Mexico's government settled down. So by 1917, these bandit wars had come to an end. So now the story of Weslaco really begins. Real estate men began to buy ranches of the Spanish land grant. It was sometimes hard to find the owners. There were so many of them by this time. But once found, most of them were glad to sell their small portions of land for different reasons. Some had become educated into professions or businesses and didn't want a ranch. Others saw it as a chance to get away from family entanglements. And some lost their land to debts. But whatever the reason, they were paid less than the real estate men who resold the land. Now, these real estate men worked for land companies that would divide the ranch properties into small farms. But they had a big problem. The land was covered with thick cactus and brush and had to be cleared before man could farm it. Along with clearing the land, irrigation canals had to be dug to carry water from the river to the farms. Without water, a man couldn't farm. Now let me tell you something. These canals that you see every day were dug completely by manual labor. A man would guide a large scoop called a fresno that was attached to a mule. When the fresno was filled with dirt, it was carried to the side and emptied. Now that was hard work. So when a farm was finally cleared of brush and a canal brought water to it, the big push to sell began. And you have to understand that these realtors advertised all over the United States describing the valley as the new frontier and a garden paradise. And men and women came by trainloads to see it. Our little towns were still frontier towns with only a few motels, so the land companies built their own hotels called clubhouses on our pretty Resacas. The businessmen and farmers were brought down here on chartered rail cars for a fun-filled weekend to be wined and dined. They were called excursion parties. Well, the guests were excursioned in touring cars to model farms where a salesman would help them envision a new lifestyle in tropical splendor. Mr. W.E. Stewart was just such a land developer. This is a picture of his clubhouse on Llano Grande Lake, which in those days had a sandy bottom and was a favorite place for swimming and picnicking. So you can imagine how they felt if they discovered that the piece of land they had bought was a tanglewood of brush. Most had to live in a tent until they could build a house to live in. They were hard-working people, those farmers, but they had a lot to learn about the rigors of valley farming in our hot, humid climate. Together with the farm laborers from Mexico, these farmers cleared the land with nothing more than grubbing hoes and machetes. They lived and worked side by side, learning to speak each other's language, as well as adapting to new and different customs. The farm laborers often built their homes called tule huts from palm fronds found amongst the brush. Paulita Perez Briones remembers as a child that her first home was no more than a tarp overhead in a cleared portion of land. All cooking was done over an open fire. When the farmer finally built a home for his family, he built quarters for his farmhands too. After a while, entrepreneurs made a business of clearing land. They organized crews that would clear an acre in 2 weeks for $12 an acre. E.B. Ballard could rightfully brag about his corn crops in this virgin land. Many farmers paid off their mortgages in 2 to 3 crops. But you had to take the good with the bad. By 1923, farmers had had root rot, salty water, a winter freeze, and a spring flood, along with strange plant diseases that thrived in our humid climate. So they asked the state legislature to establish an agriculture research center in Weslaco to help them deal with some of their problems. For 71 years, the Texas A&M Agricultural Research and Extension Center has been a partner to Valley farmers in leading the state and the nation in developing a plentiful, safe, and inexpensive food supply. Later, the United States Department of Agriculture added their scientific team, and still later, Texas A&I University opened its citrus center. From the early white grapefruit, their scientists developed the colorful star ruby and real red that everyone likes so much. The A&M Center is on the site where the guardsmen were stationed during the Bandit Wars, and the historical markers are there to remind us that there's better things to do with land than fight wars. The farmers didn't have machines when they came here, only a plow and a mule. The first tractors were introduced in about 1925, and as late as 1939, they were still trading in their mules for tractors. Harvesting was done by hand labor, a far cry from the mechanized farming we have today. The farm laborer learned new mechanical skills, and in time many of them either acquired farms of their own or went to work in the many produce sheds, canning plants, and cotton gins that were springing up all along the railroad tracks. These are the names of some of the first farm families, some of whose descendants still farm here today.
Time
Mr. Stewart was a visionary who saw our part of the valley as a center for agriculture and its related industries. He got the idea of building a new city that would provide these services and become a trade center for farm families. 4 men from near Abilene heard of this idea. They pulled their money and bought 320 acres for $250,000. 2 of the men soon dropped out of the venture and left Ed Couch and Robert R. Reeves to develop the city. They decided to keep the name originally derived from W.E. Stewart's initials. The town streets were platted on both sides of the railroad, and announcements were posted for the auction of town site lots on December 10, 1919. I guess the best words to describe the little town was primitive. A few dirt streets and a boardwalk that wasn't much help when it rained. The Apollo Peña would deliver water from a barrel, or you could get it yourself from the wide open canals that crossed the city on the northeast side near the Horton School. The only place to get ice was in Mercedes or Donna. People still needed a blacksmith like Mr. Cardenas to shoe their horses. The pretty little girl at his knee would someday become the mother of Dr. Armando Cuellar, the future mayor of Weslaco. Gigi Robles, after working a stint clearing the brush, decided he'd rather be a merchant. He opened his first store, a meat market, on 2nd Street. Later, he expanded into a large supermarket on Texas. Abel Garza had a large mercantile center which had a barber shop on the north edge of town, catering to the farm folks. Not far from him was a Molina slaughterhouse. Esteban Cantu and his wife Paula opened a grocery and clothing store on Kansas at about the same time. On Texas was a model drug owned by pharmacist Antonio Valdez. Mr. and Mrs. Matar opened a men's clothing store on Missouri. On 5th Street, behind where Edelstein's is today, stood a row of 5 businesses that faced north. On the night of October 10, 1921, a mysterious fire burned these 5 businesses to the ground. No, Weslaco didn't have a fire department yet. These merchants decided they would rebuild on Texas because it offered more room for growth. And grow it did. They really got serious now about their city. First, they incorporated with a mayor-council type of government. L.H. Nix was the first mayor. Electricity and water were at the top of their list. The first water lines were made from strips of redwood bound together with copper wire. Soon following were public services like a post office and telephone operator. I'm sure glad somebody thought to keep the first one of these. After the disastrous fire, a fire truck was high on the priority list. W.F. Anderson became the first fire chief of the volunteer fire department. The folks must have been very law-abiding because the first police chief wasn't hired until 1928. He was Jesse Avenger, and you can still see his pistol at our police station today. They say he bought it at Borderland Hardware for $27.50, paying 50 cents a month for 2 years. And Main Street Weslaco really took off. More drugstores, clothing stores, lady supplies for women, and De La Rosas for the men, even a dry cleaner's. Burton Auto had its beginnings, as did 3 banks and 2 barbers, Johnny Petty and Pantaleon Garza. Rene Garza carries on the family tradition today. Kino advertised as having the best food in town. Everett and John Knapp opened their car dealership, and with it came more business for 2 gas stations, Antonio Guerra's and the 1,000-mile loop station across from the Cortez. Ferris and Blanche Wells opened Wellsworth, the 5 and dime store where everyone loved to shop. Frank and Grace Yoder in Edrington Studio recorded many of these times through their cameras. Highway 83 was paved and dubbed the longest main street in Texas. Much of the comings and goings was reported in the Weslaco News. Life insurance agents, realtors, lawyers, and doctors found their way to Weslaco, and most noticeable were 4 lumber yards that could hardly keep up with the demands for building supplies. Eldimiro Cavazos, who helped survey the original town site, opened a neighborhood market on Las Palmas and Hidalgo Street, and his properties became a small park-like area where families would gather for dances and fun on Saturday nights. Today, the Linda Cavazos Neighborhood Park marks the place. Mary Leal recalls that her father, Agapito Leal, helped to clear the lots for the town site, and he left one special tree standing to mark the spot where he would one day build his home. Now, 75 years later, his children still fulfill his dream. Weslaco was the fastest growing town in the valley. 3 hotels were important for the many newcomers. They were the Paloma, the Weslaco Hotel, and the elegant Cortez. Prohibition was in full swing when the Cortez had its grand opening on New Year's Eve 1928. Decorated with Spanish moss hanging from its ceilings, the management quite literally served bathtub gin from their new guest rooms, or so I've been told. Santos Galvan was the chef at the Cortez Hotel for many years before he opened his grocery store across from the Horton School. So all you kids at Horton School, tell your principal, Dr. Cardenas, that you know where her daddy worked in the olden days. Oh, and Texas Avenue added a boulevard. The old community building came down. It had been used for many occasions, including classrooms before schools were built, but the new City Hall reflected the desire for beauty as well as usefulness. The ornamentation on its outside walls were called cast stones, made from liquid concrete and special aggregates. The architect was Newell Waters, whose wife, Clementine, still lives in Weslaco today. Delta Art Stone Company in Mercedes made the cast for original clay models, but it's a lost art today. Now, to really appreciate this documentary, you have to put yourself in a sort of time capsule and imagine what things were like in the 1920s and 30s. Highway 77 and 281 might have been in somebody's noble plan, but they weren't on the ground yet, and top speed for cars might have been, say, 45 miles an hour. And sure, airplanes have been invented, but, well, you know what I'm trying to say. So the point to this is that once you made up your mind to live here, you stayed here. The folks made their own entertainment. I don't think they invented clubs, but clubs were the means to bringing people together and getting things done for both the town and the schools. 10 of Weslaco's clubs had their beginnings during this time.
We had Halloween Carnival each fall, and the different service clubs in town took care of each of the booths, and all the proceeds were donated to the school.
From the first issue of the Rotary Graph in the 1930s, we read, "Rotary is making every effort to bring to Weslaco, through the combined efforts of all the civic clubs, as well as the schools, the finest auditorium ever built in these parts, with gym, cafeteria, library, and the women's building all in one. Rotary is going places with a good community." The women were often the first to see community needs and would organize themselves to find solutions. The Well Baby Clinic was just an example. The need for the clinic was high infant death rates due to malnutrition and dehydration. Operated by church women, funded by service clubs, and staffed voluntarily on a rotating basis by the doctors. It served indigent women and babies. From it developed the City Welfare Department under the capable direction of Mrs. L.M. Gallion, long before the country provided these services. For the many tuberculosis patients, the Women's Study Club provided isolation huts so patients could be near their families. The women of the Chaturik Club brought the first iron lung into the valley when polio became so rampant in the late 30s and 40s. And everyone looked forward to the annual flower shows that the Garden Club sponsored. So important have women been to Weslaco that for 42 years, Beta Sigma Phi sororities honored a First Lady of Weslaco for her community services. Clubs filled a social need. For both men and women, it was a touch with the world of arts, music, and literature that many had left behind. Churches were also important to these early settlers. At the townside auction, the city fathers donated lots to any church official present to claim them. The Presbyterians, the Baptist, Methodist, and the Christian denomination each obtained land and built their churches soon after. In 1924, La Santísima Trinidad Metodista was established, worshiping for 3 years in the Valdez drugstore building until their present church was erected. This year marks the 70th anniversary. In 1929, St. Joan of Arc Catholic Church mission was dedicated, and by 1931, a new building was needed. Its priest was Father James R. Cassidy, sent here from New York. He believed strongly in education, and he built a small parochial school in his parish in 1940. Under his very able direction, 2 generations of parishioners' children attended school there until 1968. Dear to the memory of those days were the annual fundraising events, during which a young boy or girl would be crowned. 3 guesses who this king is. Manuel Cano, and the proud graduate is Monsi Montalvo. Father Cassidy also organized the men and women into societies. The men's group was called the League of Protección Mexicanos of St. Joan of Arc, which saw to the building needs of the church and the school, as well as special events such as parades and dances. The women's group, Vea Perpetual, like other church women in Weslaco, held out their helping hand. 1935 is the date when Professor Benjamin Cuellar and his niece Olivia Cuellar came to Weslaco from San Antonio. The professor taught Spanish to the children of Hispanic families who wanted to be sure their children were as proficient in correct Spanish as they were in correct English. But the professor did much more than teach Spanish. He helped organize an annual event for the celebration of 16 de Septiembre, a national holiday of Mexico that recalled Mexico's independence from Spain. There would be a big parade led by the Weslaco High School Band as the Queen and her court would wind its way past the Ice House on Kansas Street to St. Joan of Arc Church and later to La Placita Park. There, the colorful Juan Garcia Cano, now 91 years old, dressed in his charro costume, would reenact Father Hidalgo's call to arms. His grito would be a signal for music and dancing to begin.
Dios, mi libertad. Padre, Padre, mi patria es lo primero, dijo Vicente Guerrero. Lord, a Hidalgo. Lord, a México.
His niece Olivia taught folkloric dancing to the young boys and girls, and soon street dances on Kansas became a lively event that everyone looked forward to, as shown here by Dr. Amparo Cárdenas and her sister Amalia de la Garza. The street is silent now, but its happy memories remain. Gone too are the Stardust Club and the Lucky 13 Club, but the children and the children's children of these early settlers carry on the tradition of serving Weslaco through clubs. Today, 55 organizations of various interests help Weslaco be a good place to live. In 1929, when Weslaco was 10 years old, the folks decided to celebrate with the birthday party. Ed Couch himself led the floats. There were marching bands and folkloric dances. The women created a most unique style show that paid tribute to the vegetables and fruit industries. If you think we are the recycling generation, well, you're wrong. Using every part of a plant, from the seed to leaves, each piece was carefully cut and pasted or sewed onto a basic Muslim foundation. The first attempts weren't very flattering, to say the least. But they became more sophisticated as the women learned to work with these fresh and fragile materials. A hectic but fun time was held by all. Except during the war years, the birthday parties were an annual event until 1954. The party of 1936 was special because that was when the merchants had remodeled their storefronts with red tile trim and blue neon lighting. Weslaco really did look pretty then, with palm trees adding to the charm. Farm families came to town on Saturday afternoon. Police Chief Bledsoe roped off 5th Street so the boys could play roller skate hockey using branches for sticks and rolled up aluminum gum wrappers for pucks, while Mom and Dad did their shopping. Main Street was the place to be on Saturday night.
And on Saturday night, what we did was get in the car and park right in front of the hotel just to look all the people go by, parade back and forth. And that was our Saturday night, late Saturday night movies, like they have now. But it was such a clean life, healthy, clean life.
Mr. and Mrs. Miguel Benitez owned the first movie theater before talkies. Mrs. Benitez remembers that 2 men were needed in the projector room, one to turn the reel machine and the other to operate the music roll. And you hope they could coordinate the 2 operations. Talking Pictures came along in 1926. Janie Arredondo Train says that Hispanic girls couldn't go to movies without their mothers sitting 2 rows behind them as chaperones.
And there was a boy that was trying to make Google eyes at us. Our mothers would be sitting behind us. And that boy, he'll come and ask us, "Can I sit with you?" We always say yes, and my mother says it's okay. So he had to walk back and ask our mother, "Is it all right if I sit with your daughter?" If she said fine, it was beautiful.
The Ritz Theater was next to the gym, where the children's Saturday matinee crowd would see shoot-'em-ups and be left in suspense with cliff-hanging endings that would easily be explained in the next installment the following Saturday. Newlyweds had a hard time.
The fact that they captured a newlywed bride and groom, and as a ransom, in order to let them go their own way privately, they made the groom roll his nervous bride the full length of Texas Boulevard to the amused applaud of all of the people in town. Practically, they turned out of the stores, and this was a community entertainment. One of the other things that was an early tradition that was very helpful, because these were back in the days of the Depression, and this was called a pounding. And usually everyone in the community would organize one particular night soon after the newlyweds' wedding, and every guest would take a pound of food stuff, either sugar, flour, shortening, whatever, which was really a most valuable gift in those days to help start a new household.
The railroad carried passengers in those days. Meeting the train was a sort of social event. For sure, you saw the newcomers and incoming freight revealed who was getting something new.
I remember we all used to get together and tell our mothers we wanted to go to meet the train because we had some letters to mail. But actually, we weren't going to mail any letters. We were going to see the boys parading around.
Remember the operettas at Stephen F. Austin Elementary.
I remember the Stephen F. Austin operettas. Every child in school was involved, and most of them, we had everything from a mouse to a moonbeam to a worm or flowers, and they all had such a great time for us.
Odilia Longoria was a teacher at North Ward Elementary, which later became Leoline Horton in memory of one of its teachers. She remembers that some of the children didn't speak English when they started school.
Every morning once I sit down, I get up, I clean my hands, I go to the board, and we repeated that every day until they learn those few words. Then we kept adding 1 or 2 words This is a bird and with pictures, like somebody mentioned. We had magazine pictures and all that. And this is an apple. The apple is red. They wanted to say the apple red, because that's the way we say it in Spanish. And we had a hard time, but by the end of the year, they were speaking not too much English, but they were able to communicate. Sixth grade graduation at Dodge Ward was a big day for everybody. The teachers were busy scrubbing the big white building, have it white and clean. Then we covered it with ferns, flowers, and made it pretty for the night. And at night, the children came all so pretty, all dressed up, and the parents so proud. And to us, it was a big satisfaction seeing them going up the steps, getting their diploma, and coming to their parents for a big hug.
I was the only school nurse in the whole system. I knew every child in town. In fact, I was the first school nurse in the whole valley. I worked for $50 a month my first 2 years in school.
We had no air conditioning in those days. The children got very fidgety when gnats were flying around us, and sweat would begin to roll down their faces, and it was impossible for them to sit still. So it was a very, very bad situation.
Then they'd get pink eye, and all the teachers would send the ones that had pink eye to the nurse's office so she could take care of them or send them home.
I can remember when maybe one day in the first grade I'd have 60 people, a norther would come in, and the next day maybe I'd have 4. So it varied greatly.
We shall always remember and be grateful to the many teachers who dedicated themselves to inspiring and motivating 2 generations of Weslaco's youth. The old Stephen F. Austin that we remember has since been demolished, and its going perhaps closed a chapter in the life of Weslaco. But it didn't erase the many happy memories of a time when life was simpler and maybe even more fun. First a sugarcane festival, and now our 1015 Onion Fest have replaced our birthday parties, but our tribute to agriculture remains true. We don't ask our young ladies to model costumes any longer, but we proudly choose a queen to represent Weslaco at other Valley functions.
Thank you to all of you. Good night, and please go home safely.
As band members proudly marched in their royal purple and white uniforms today, it is hard to imagine that once the uniforms were green and gold, or that they replaced the purple sweaters and white slacks of the original band. Pacesetters weren't even imagined in the early days. Uniforms add dignity, of course, but the band of WHS has had more than that. In the 1930s, they won 6 state championships and 1 national award. Over the years, our band has continued to bring home honors. In 1992, as well as recently in '94, the Panther Corps represented Weslaco as one of the top 18 bands in the state of Texas. The Pigskin Jubilee, a valley-wide UIL competition, became part of our annual birthday celebration. Over the years, our high school choirs and other individuals have also attained high state and national recognition. Lots of things have changed, haven't they? I mean, 75 years ago, who would have ever thought we'd be making a videotape of our 75 years? The folks at KRGV would have believed it. They have lived in a world of changing technology since 1934. First, there was radio, and in 1954, television Channel 5. They had many live programs in the early days, but who would forget Molten Ty Cobb? A generation of school children grew up appearing on his show. Many Weslaco young people also had their first taste of show business at our unique Water Tower Theater. When Cecil Massey, the city manager, came up with the idea of converting the concrete water storage tank into a theater in the round, most of us just shook our heads. Through the talents of Shirley Atkins and her daughter Risa, Weslaco has enjoyed this entertainment for many years. Another top-notch theatrical group under the capable direction of Tom Dawson is the theater. We wish time would permit us to tell about the hometown boys who made it good in showbiz. Rising star musicians like John Soleather, Johnny Garcia, or Valdemar Toby Bo Silva, and movie stars like Pat Hingle or David Spielberg, and playwright Joe Turner Cantu. But we can introduce you to our talented Rodrigo Alberto Rodriguez, who composed the original score for this video. He shares his talents with us as music teacher at Airport Elementary. Rod comes from a musical family, as many will remember his father playing the piano. Many others knew him from the shoe department at Wells Fashions. Weslaco also has political successes like Renato Cuellar, state representative for the 39th District, and Texas's first Hispanic Supreme Court Justice, Raul Gonzalez. What is it that makes Weslaco and its people succeed in spite of the obstacles through the years? Perhaps the words of Justice Gonzalez's mother sums it up for us.
My husband was a trucker, migrate to the north, but my children stay by home. They will migrate with us until September. I say, your responsibility is go and do the grades. My responsibility is look for and work for the money to pay. We have never been in welfare, which makes me very proud, and it shows the boys that when your strength is your sacrifice, what you do and you have. You really appreciate things when you really work for them. I think the teachers are very important in the education of everybody, because I got as role models two teachers. One was my Mrs. Hogue and Mrs. Black.
Louise Black, Mary Hogue, names on the front of our public schools. But who were they to be so honored? Louise Black was a high school English and journalism teacher for 41 years. But this doesn't express the respect her students had for her, nor the interest she took in them. Mary Hogue was an 8th grade social studies teacher for 30 years, and her name has survived the changes and growth within the schools. This was the original Mary Hogue Junior High, and this campus became Mary Hogue Junior High, and now the new 9th grade campus is the Mary Hogue Academy. Another campus to move with the growth is the high school.
This was the high school when we graduated from Weslaco.
And 98 of us graduated that year, which was considered a large class.
Since we went to high school here, things have really changed.
All the students helped move the furniture.
And when I was a freshman, we helped plant this grass.
Hi, we graduated from Weslaco High School in 1977 with 327 students.
We were looking forward to moving to this new school with air conditioning, tennis courts, science labs, and more.
Everyone knows about Sam Houston and Roosevelt. Airport and North Bridge schools designate an area of town, and Memorial represents the soldiers that fought battles for our freedom. But Quaid and Margot elementary schools were named in honor of two doctors who provided leadership on the school board. One of two new schools opening this year is the Tony Rico Elementary School, in honor of an educator who graduated from Weslaco and was superintendent for 16 years. It is fitting that Weslaco's new school, Kleckler Hailed, be named for two girls basketball coaches who personified all the qualities of good sportsmanship and team effort, and who worked diligently to instill them in 16 years of athletics in Weslaco. Friday night football is a tradition since its first team beat Donna in 1924, and that was just the first of many championships. And who would ever forget Faux Ed Matar talking us through the games at the old Barbie Stadium, named for W.T. Barbie, an early superintendent who died of typhoid and typhus fever, two common diseases in the early days. When Bobby Lackey stopped thrilling the crowds at WHS, he went to the University of Texas and on to professional ranks before he came home to Weslaco. But the most famous football team of Weslaco was in 1942, when 8 members of the squad joined the Marines as a group. Of the 8 young men who left, 7 survived World War II. The 8th Marine became immortalized in the famous photograph of the flag raising in the battle for Iwo Jima. 2 weeks later, Corporal Harlem Block was killed there. Weslaco named a park in his honor. 5th and 6th graders raised money to erect a memorial in 1979. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Jack Suiter went down with the USS Arizona. The veterans of foreign wars, Post 8563, and the American Legion, Post 464, are named in memory of Milton Gates, who died in World War I, and the Catholic War veterans honor Joe Garza with his name for their Post 770. In the city park, a memorial to all Weslaco boys who have been killed in military action was constructed by the Weslaco Lulacs. And in the center of Highland Park Cemetery is the Ring of Honor. Laid to rest around the center flagpole are the graves of our boys who made the ultimate sacrifice in the Korean and Vietnam conflicts. It is impossible to know exactly how many men and women who served their country in wartime called Weslaco home, but each service was well represented. Not many can boast of 2 Air Force generals, but Lieutenant General, now deceased, Cecil Childrey and retired Major General Walter Hope Baxter III have brought pride and dignity to Weslaco. On certain occasions, we pause to remember, to honor, and to thank those who help preserve the freedom we sometimes take for granted. So through our daily contact on the farms and in the schools and on Main Street, there developed a spirit of community that would be tested through wars and natural disasters. And tested we were. None of the old-timers ever forgot the hurricane of 1933, and Beulah remains in our recent memory. Even more devastating were winter freezes that wiped out the entire citrus industry leaving farmers with their lives' work destroyed and families without jobs. Before the floodways were created, rising water was a common danger. In 1941, the international bridge to Rio Rico, Mexico, collapsed. Ferry boats carried passengers until 1951, when the new bridge was built. Mr. Arturo Arredondo was persuaded to open a restaurant on the other side to encourage bridge crossings. In March of this year, southbound traffic to Mexico included 87,909 automobiles, 2,641 trucks, and 132,242 pedestrians. As we celebrate yet another Weslaco birthday party, it is fitting that we recognize William F. Powell. He spearheaded our 50th celebration and is chairman of this year's celebration. Like his father Forrest, he has been a vital part of Weslaco. Mr. Powell's civic commitment long has been with Knapp Medical Center, a dream shared by Weslaco's early doctors who brought many of us into this world and were close by when loved ones passed on. Knapp Medical Center is embarking upon its third building project since its beginning in 1962. We are grateful for the 46 doctors of 17 specialties that staff it today. The additional 6-story facility will not only move the hospital into the 21st century, but will radically change Weslaco's skyline. But Weslaco's skyline has already changed. Much of the business district has shifted to Expressway 83, and large chain stores cater to a new generation living a faster lifestyle. Our Crop Dusters Airport is expanding to accept corporate jets that are expected with the increase of commerce from the North American Free Trade Treaty, and much farmland is being replaced by new businesses and a regional National Guard armory, far cry from their garrison at the old Llano Grande Depot so long ago. And just as the Midwesterners came in the early days, they are coming still, only this time in their long, shiny motorhomes. And just as they did before, they are spawning new growth and industry on the Llano Grande land grant. From Weslaco's original town site, Borderland Hardware is the only business still in operation by the same family. From the mid-20s, we have Molina's Tortilla Factory, still a part of their family, and from the 1930s, still in their same location. Close to them, Kino still advertises the best food in town, managed by Jaime Perales. Wells of Weslaco long ago replaced the 5 and Dime store, but the Wells family are still a vital part of Weslaco. How proud Antonio Valdez would be to know that not only his son Lupe, but his grandson Buddy de la Rosa and his great-granddaughter Leticia de la Rosa have carried on his profession in Weslaco. Jimmy and Bud Payne couldn't put their dealership on this corner like their dad Ed did years ago. Joe and Terry Barbie continue to serve the farmers in the Mid-Valley, carrying on from Clifford Sherry years ago. And the 2 Roman Montalvos and 2 Miguel Hinojosas are other father and son businesses that show that Weslaco is a good place to live and make a living. This quilt was skillfully created by the women of Weslaco's Bicultural Museum Guild. It depicts the events we have recounted, but it can't portray the spirit of our people. We are a bicultural community that strangers quickly discern, but can never completely explain. We have strived for similar goals and maintained the basis for a nurturing family environment. We believe in teaching our children strong and high moral standards of living, and we're proud to know that our very own children will continue to lead our hometown into new and adventurous futures.
Let us remember a name, a face. Let us remember a time, a year. Each one of us has a friend to share, some memory that happened here. Remember the old was once the new, then styles changed and missing more. Long time ago when our town began, they had a plan that lit so bold. May the city be a home to all who want to come. Welcome everyone, young and old. Here's to Weslaco. With a spirit guiding us in love, love that knows no end. Every man a friend, young and old. We love Weslaco. Recordemos un nombre, un rostro, recordemos un tiempo, el año. Todos tenemos un amigo, una memoria que allí pasó. Recuerda que lo de ayer era nuevo, tiempo pasó y lo nuevo fue pasado. Hace tiempo que el pueblo empezaron, tenían un sueño y aquí lo encontraron. Que este pueblo sea su hogar, jóvenes y de edad, bienvenidos todos. Viva Weslaco. Con espíritu de amor, amor que no conoce un fin es eterno. Viva Weslaco. May the city be a home to all who want to come. Welcome everyone, young and old. Here's to Weslaco. With a spirit guiding us in love, love that knows no end. Every man a friend, young and old. We love Weslaco. Que este pueblo Thank you.